Thank you.
Jamie, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Is this the remote, please? Okay, I want you to stand next to this thing, so I can change.
Clicker is what?
I don't know where there's a clicker.
Is that the ink? Is that it?
This doesn't seem like it's doing anything. Anyway.
Want me to work that thing for you?
Thank you to my lovely assistant.
Yeah. Which button do you have set for?
So that one. Yeah, back and forth. I'm gonna try it. Okay. So, hello to folks streaming, hello to everybody that came in the room, and thank you to the folks in the room. It seems I know all of you, which is so exciting, and I feel so supported by you all. I appreciate that. So this session is psychological safety is the key. I'm a certified 4 stages facilitator, and I'm Jamie Moyer, the founder of Within Collective, and I'm excited to be here today. So the outcomes are, I want to dispel some of the myths about what psychological safety is and is not. Talk about why this is the key to diverse and innovative high-performing teams, and identify the 4 stages of psychological safety in the workplace. So what is psychological safety? Have you all heard of psychological safety?
I have heard it, but I don't know
What
what
it
actual
means.
definition would
Yeah,
contribute to it.
have you heard about it? A little bit. Yeah, so Dr. Amy Edmondson actually coined the term psychological safety. And she says that the one thing she wishes people would know is that it's not like a fuzzy, warm, like everybody gets a trophy kind of a thing. It's actually pretty hard to have psychologically safe spaces because you have to be vulnerable, you have to allow for difference, you have to be able to disagree and come up with new creative solutions together. So it's not warm and fuzzy all the time, but that doesn't mean you can be cruel and mean and like those kind of things. It just means we're creating a different kind of workplace where we can get things wrong, we can make mistakes, we're okay to not be perfect, which perfection happens to be one of the tenets of work culture in the US that is pretty unhealthy because none of us are perfect, right? Yeah. Next one. So like I said, Dr. Amy Edmondson, so she says psychological safety is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And Dr. Tim Clark, who he learned from Dr. Amy Edmondson and I learned from Dr. Tim Clark. So he boils it down to psychological safety is rewarded vulnerability. So if I'm vulnerable, if I say I don't know this, you reward me with not shaming or blaming or making me feel guilty or dumb. You say, that's okay, I didn't know that either. Let's figure out the solution together, or let's, do whatever thing. So this is a safety audit that can kind of make you some questions you can ask yourself to think about do you have psychological safety on your team? If you make a mistake on your team, will it be held against you? Will somebody make you feel badly about making a mistake? Are the members of your team able to bring up problems and tough issues? One of the things I see a lot in my clients is that they don't know how to have conversations about tough issues, and they don't want to bring up the problem because they're seen as the problem at that point for talking about the problem, which is kind of a tough spot to be in. So do people on your team sometimes reject others for being different? It's really hard to work with people who are not like us, right? It's easy for us to work with people that are like us. It's more difficult to work with people who aren't like us, and so we have to understand how to move away from this one right way thinking, right? Like I'm me and the way I work through the world is the way to be. No, that's not true, right? Humans are infinitely diverse. And when you are only working with people who are alike, you start to have that echo chamber and like-minded thinking that doesn't create innovation, right? You kind of get mired in status quo and the way we always do things. Is it safe to take a risk on your team? Can you bring up a new idea? Can you talk about, I think this would work better? Can you give somebody feedback about this thing isn't working as well as I had hoped? Is it difficult to ask your team for help? I need help with this, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overworked, I have too many things on my plate. Or, I have a lot going on personally, I need to step back from this project or some, do you have the ability to do that on your team? Would anyone on your team deliberately act in a way that undermines your effort? Do people try to sabotage each other? And when you work with other members of your team, are your each unique skills and talents valued and utilized? So can everybody be a different piece of the puzzle, right? You have different skills than me. What can you bring to the table? What can I bring to the table? How do we work together? So these are the 4 stages of psychological safety based on what we were just talking about on that last slide. It starts with inclusion. Are we including everyone as the norm, right? Do all new team members feel welcomed, feel like they can be a part of the team, or do they feel like they have to hide a piece of their identity to feel safe, right? So if they're LGBTQ, do they have to hide pictures of their partner? Do they not talk about that piece of their identity? Do they feel, in some way, do they feel excluded, right? Do people not say hi to them in the hallway? Right, like how are we creating inclusion? And from there, if people are feeling included, then we'll talk about learner safety, right? Or is it safe to learn? And then contribute, can people contribute to the team? And then finally challenging, can people challenge? So I want to talk about maybe what this feels like and what behaviors people exhibit at each stage. So let's talk about inclusion. What are some ways that you feel included when you're new in a place?
Simple hello.
Saying hello, yes. Acknowledging that this person is in your space.
Right.
Share commonality of, either what you do, the same. For me, I like people that think like me. So, and then they will understand how I think.
Right, so what is something you have in common and how can we connect over that? Sure.
Being as my opinion, I guess, and having time to explain that under circumstances and
Yeah, like, you know something about this. Why don't we ask you about that? That's great, yeah. Yeah, it feels good to be included,
Yeah.
right? It feels good to be seen. Like, I remember when somebody remembers my name, I feel kind of like warm, right? Like, oh my gosh, that person remembered my name. I kind of matter. So that's just simple things that can help people feel included. So inclusion safety satisfies our basic human need to be included, be accepted, and belong. It's not expensive to be myself, and I'm accepted for who I am, including my unique attributes and defining characteristics. Right? I have purple hair. Is that normal in a professional work setting? Maybe not. I think it's more accepted nowadays. But I can feel welcomed at the library for having purple hair because they just make me feel welcome for who I am. So how can I create inclusion safety? Ask. Ask if you need help, ask if you can help me, ask a question, invite to share your knowledge, invite to do something together, work on something together, and share resources. One of the biggest things I see with the clients I work with are like people hoarding information and not sharing and not giving people the information that they need or the resources that they need because they feel like they have to guard their position for some reason in their role. So they're not feeling safe to share. So we'd have to dig into the bottom of the root causes of maybe why that is. Why does that person feel not safe to share? And how can we create a different culture where we can share our resources, share our knowledge, everybody's valued, and everybody can contribute. So the next piece is learning safety. So what kind of behaviors help you when you're trying to learn?
I need to take notes, and I need that process to whatever I write, then it will register in my brain.
That's funny. I'm the same way. Like I have to, like I can see it, I can listen to it, all the things, but until I write it down, it doesn't get in my head. For whatever reason, I have to do that visual connection. And I think I'm very visual, so I don't know if that's kinetic learning. There's different learning styles, right? Like some people need to hear it and they'll learn. Some people need to do it and they'll learn, right?
I have to do it. I got to do it.
You gotta do it. What about you, Griffin?
A challenge, a conversation, it starts with a conversation with somebody saying, we don't think that's possible. It's like, well, tell me more about it.
Tell me more. I love that.
Explain why, and then from there you can kind of deconstruct that into like, okay, we know we can get to point B or C. How do we jump from there to H or J or M? And then start kind of breaking that down. And then if it's a matter of me educating myself, learning more about how can something be done that hasn't been done before, then you jump into online tutorials or online training. If it's a matter of working the workflow, how things get done that needs to be adjusted, then it's a matter of talking to people and kind of guiding that conversation. Because you don't want to impose something is the quickest way for somebody not to do something.
Yes.
But
You're very strategic, and I love that thinking, in that you're not saying it's not possible. You're saying, how can we do this? I love that question. How many times have you heard that's not possible? Right, right? That just shuts you down, right? That's like a balloon getting burst. When you think things are possible, right, they are.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Henry Ford, but I do like the quote where he said, either you can or you can't. You're absolutely right.
Right, we just haven't learned how.
Yeah, yeah, I love radical envisioning, and so we'll definitely have to do a little more of that. But yeah, so learner safety, so it satisfies the basic human need to learn and to grow, to explore, like what can we do? To feel safe in my learning process, I need to write it down. That, not everybody needs to write it down, but I need to write it down. And so how can we make space for learners like me? And I say that there's no stupid questions except for the questions that aren't asked. That's the only time, because I feel like if I have a question, somebody else might have that same question, right? And giving and receiving feedback, right? Like, I don't know everything. You know something that I don't know, and I can say, hey, what about this? And you can say, oh, you know what? Did you think about this? And then it's like we're safe to learn and grow and make our places of work even better. Experiment, and we can even make mistakes. We can try it, didn't quite work, we'll just try it this way, right? How many times do you have to iterate something? Yeah, So how do we create learner safety? We model as leaders asking questions, not acting like we know everything. I don't know everything, and I'm okay with that. That's a heavy load to know all the things. Encourage participation. Like how would you do this? You have more experience with this. What do you think? And then protect. So if something goes wrong, I'm the leader. I made the choice to do this, and it didn't work out, and that's okay. We're gonna pivot, and we'll do this thing, right? So we're not gonna shame or blame or guilt anyone if something doesn't go perfectly. So contributor safety is a little bit different than inclusion safety. What do you think it is to be a contributor?
Be open to hearing other opinions.
Yeah.
Possible other ways to do it.
Yeah.
There's ways of appreciating different cultures. So.
Being a part of the group, I guess.
Right. So I like that this picture is puzzle pieces. Like, what piece am I in this puzzle of the work that we do? So contributor safety satisfies the basic human need to make a difference. You feel safe to use your skills and abilities to offer a meaningful contribution. So this contributor safety is earned, right? Like, I'm being hired for a role, and I have to have a minimum qualification to be in that role. But once I'm in that role, I should be able to contribute, right? I should be able to do my job and feel safe to use my skills to do my job, right? So how can I create contributor safety? You explain the why. We need to do this thing because of this reason, right? Like, we need to make a database to hold all of the things that we're working on. I say that because there's databases. So, and then assign the what. So I need you to do this part, whatever that is. I don't know computers, so whatever that part is, but delegate the how. You know how to do this, so I'm not gonna micromanage you on how you're gonna do that. Has anybody had a micromanager?
So.
How does that feel?
Horrible.
How motivated do you feel to work for that person? Woo, yeah, right. We all want to have the autonomy to do our job and be trusted to do our job. Imagine working in a place where you're trusted to do your job and you trust the people that you're working with to do their jobs, because we all have this safe working environment where I can trust you to get it done, and we all know, like, you have to do this piece, you have to do this piece, you have to do this piece, and I have to do this piece, and we're all relying on each other. And I can say, I'm gonna be late with my piece, or I need help with this piece of my piece, right? How does that feel to work in that environment where you can actually talk about these things? Like, I'm not hiding that I'm behind. I'm not afraid to ask Victor a question. I'm not afraid to, tell you that, like, it isn't working, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck, right? Like, all of the things. And then, on the positive, like, you're like, well, did you try this? And I'm like, oh, I never tried that. Oh my gosh, so I can try that, and then we can celebrate maybe that win when that works for me, right?
Yeah.
So we have that connection. I'm not just me trying to just do me, right? Like, I'm trying to actually work in a connected workspace and own my part and trust that you're gonna own your part. Challenger safety. This one's my favorite. Who's a challenger? Anybody? A little bit of rebels in here.
Yeah.
It's my rebel crew. Yeah, I'm totally that plane going like, what if we do it this way? But all these other planes are like, what are you saying? Stop it. We're going this way. So tell me about a time maybe that you felt like excited with a new idea and challenged something. How did that feel? What happened?
I think for me, it was when I saw myself I could do it, it was like really awesome because it gave me power back to say, I know my shit.
Yes, I know this. I know this is gonna work. And then it worked. Nice.
And sometimes it's interesting because managing expectation, not only for yourself, but for other people, come into place. You know how to make it happen. And somebody might challenge that. It's like, well, I know because that's why I'm here. And so now you're not really addressing perhaps the technical component of that particular operation. It's more how to get the buy-in from either the department or the organization to fall into your vision of something. And
Right.
sometimes that
Right.
can include a couple different angles there.
Right. Can you, do you have the working environment where you can challenge or
Right.
not? And how do you manage the expectations of that? Of, I want to try this thing, I want to challenge this thing. It may not work. And if it works, I think it'll be killer.
Yeah.
Right?
You mentioned something interesting there, which was culture. Like the ability to have that culture, which really opens the conversation a couple different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only the ability for you to feel safe and challenge things, but knowing that it's not a one-to-one relationship between you and your immediate supervisor, but it's spread across the organization. So whether you're talking to, Department A or Department B, that you have that consistency in the standards, that you can apply the same tools to deliver the message, even though that you get hopefully the same message.
I love that because often in workplaces we have the silos, right? Where this group does it this way, but this group does it this way, but this group does it this way. And so we have this inconsistent results, right? Or somebody's locked into this one-way thinking, and these two other teams are like, no, we're doing it this way and just getting these amazing results, right? And so then it starts this weird dynamic, right? And so how do we challenge that one-way thinking, and how do we break down those silos, right? So it's intentional. It's the intentional connection that we have to cultivate in our systems, right? So how often do I collaborate with that group? You know, and what are the ways that we can share information and share ideas and bring new voices to the table?
More often than not, at least in the technical arena, you find two schools of thought. You know, we have done this with this technology for so long, we know it works.
Yeah.
And here comes you say, well, there's this new framework or this new programming language, and you can get it done faster. Oh, but if it's not broken, why try to fix it? You know, and sometimes you know, at least in IT, you get the idea that if you can provide a proof of concept within a day or a couple of days, you're like, well, let me draft something for you and let me prove it. Then more often than not, it's okay, we can do that. But oftentimes, if it's a major project and there's more departments involved, then you cannot have to compromise at times with that as well, which is not always ideal, but you know, at that point, you look for the overall success of the project, not the task at hand.
Right. So what's the weight of do the benefits outweigh the
Right.
the hassle or the time or and sometimes we don't know. So that's why it's good to have a proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
To see, because we know, technology is always changing. So we have to figure out, is this the time that we're going to change it or are we going to wait? Is this the time we're going to change it or are we going to wait? Especially when you talk about a system that affects, so many different users, right? Like, if something's obsolete, you have to go back and change all of the things that thing talked to, right? That could be really complicated, but, and new isn't always better. So we do have to acknowledge that at sometimes. Like sometimes the shiny thing is just the shiny thing, but it's not better, So, so challenger safety satisfies our human need to make things better. I feel safe to speak up and challenge the status quo when I think there's a need or opportunity to improve. And, when is it right for me to do this, right? Do I just come in and be a rebel all the time and just no, this isn't about just being a disruptor all the time, just because you like to do that. It's really, can you contribute and can you make things better? And are you working in your organization to allow that? So for challenger safety to be able to exist, we have to allow for divergent thinking. So we think differently. Some people may think similarly, but we have to allow different ways people think. Constructive dissent, right? Like, I really think this is the time we should do this thing. Tolerance for candor. Can I just tell you something without you feeling like I'm attacking you or like I'm trying to undermine you, right? Like, what is our relationship? Can you come to me and say, Jamie, what the hell? Like, what is our tolerance for candor? And creative difference, I really like, has anybody heard of Linda Hill, Dr. Linda Hill? So she studies leaders, specifically who innovate. And she studied teams all over the globe. I know she worked with Pixar, but I can't think of other names right off the top of my head. But so she talks about the creative cycle that these organizations have, where they have creative abrasion, where they can knock up against each other and say, I think this way, and I think, and so then they work that through, and they have creative agility to be like, well, if we take some of this and take some of this, then maybe we could do this. And then they have some creative resolution, like, okay, we're going to pilot this. And that cycle is what allows those organizations to be innovative because they trust each other, they can dissent, they have the candor to say, I don't think that's going to work. And not everybody thinks the same. I hire people that know things I don't know. So I trust them to bring the ideas that I hired them to bring. Woohoo. I guess maybe we're too
No moving.
Still?
Too still.
Yeah.
dancing. All right. Everybody want to get up and move? All right. So why I'm talking about this talk today, it ties directly to the Great Resignation. We've seen during COVID, people leaving jobs because they had to be caregivers, a lot of reasons. And I think it was just kind of like this awakening, like, I don't want to work for a place that doesn't value me, right? I don't want to work for a place that expects me to work 90 million hours and doesn't let me take my vacation time, or doesn't trust me to work from home, or right? So MIT researchers, Dr. Donald Saul and Charlie Saul, did some research about why people were quitting. They used Glassdoor and kind of figured out like the themes about why people were leaving based on the Glassdoor reviews people were leaving as they left. And they boiled down the top 3. People feeling disrespected in their workplaces, people not feeling included, and or their organization doesn't value diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. DEI, DIB, EDI, JEDI. There's a lot of acronyms. They're talking about inclusion and toxic cultures and or leaders. Gallup says people leave managers, they don't leave organizations. And so a lot of the organizations I work with, this is definitely a theme where the folks, they were good at one level, got put into some other level, and didn't really have the skills or abilities in that level, and weren't necessarily given the skills developed in a way to help them lead well. So what this boils down to is we have to spend time investing in our people, and is it touchscreen? I learned. Look at me learning. So what MIT also found is that the secret sauce of high-performing teams was psychological safety. So Donald and Charlie Saul, they say this is the key, right? This is how we can actually have diverse, high-performing teams. And diversity, by the way, is not a person, right? Diversity is a fact. And allowing people to be themselves and work in a way that they feel honored and whole and can bring their whole selves, that allows diversity to thrive, right? People with different identities, people with different backgrounds, people with different, lived experiences can all work in a place and show up and trust each other when you take the time to cultivate this kind of workplace. I get really kind of worked up about it because I love. Have you worked in a place where you felt like you could be your whole self?
For the most part, yeah.
See, and isn't it a blessing? I say blessing, not necessarily a religious reason, but like, it feels good.
Yeah, it does.
Part of you.
Yeah. When I left an organization, I felt like I had PTSD after leaving that organization. And not to minimize PTSD, that's a horrible thing. But really, I had to have mental health help after working there because I felt so drained, exhausted, spent, like it had sucked my soul out of my body working there. And it's really made me passionate about how can people work in workplaces that they feel that joy, that spark, that like I am here and I love coming to work. That was so weird when I first started doing that. Tom will attest, like I was getting, like, I'm not a morning person. I was getting up and like getting on the computer and like excited to work because we were doing amazing things, creating spaces of belonging, creating thriving cultures that, you know, are talking to each other, are creating new things, are doing things differently, are honoring whatever identity needs to be honored, right? Like I could come as my whole weird self and not feel like, oh, you're not professional enough, or what, enter whatever, you know. The single most important factor in culture formation is how we model the behavior. From leaders all the way down, we each have the power to create the culture we want to be in, right? Like I'm creating culture around me all the time in what I accept and what I do. So if I accept you to, you know, say an off-color joke without saying, this might not be the place for it, then I'm allowing that culture to happen. If I don't hold you responsible for getting something done, but then I hold her responsible for getting something done, then it's like, that's not consistent.
Double standard.
Right. So how can I make sure that I'm always walking the same values, right? What are my deeply held core values? Is it humanity and humility? So I like that slide. Humanity and humility. Here's the top 5 ways that we can create psychological safety. Promote self-awareness. So I brought these cards here. Have you grab one? I'll share with the online folks. If you want to conquer the anxiety of life, live in the moment, live the breath. So it's just taking a moment to reflect. What is this card telling me? Not that I rule my lives with cards, but it's kind of fun to just take a step back. And how am I thinking about myself? Not worried about you, not worried about you, not worried about you, but worried about me. How are we encouraging failure? Let's be open to feedback. Give me feedback about this talk. Avoid shame, blame, guilt. I've mentioned that a couple times. And number 5, I see all the time, include the team in decisions that directly affect them. Like I see leaders come down with statements, we're gonna do this thing, we're changing this thing. But nobody from the thing that it really affects was at the table making that decision. And so it might work, but it might not work, right? Like who all needs to be at the table when we're making these decisions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
On number 2 on the previous slide,
Yeah.
I would say more room for experimentation.
Experimentation, yeah.
So
we're not talking failure, we're talking
Right,
about
because
like
sometimes words and labels have,
power.
yeah, and so, it makes me think of companies like Google, where you have the 80-20 rule, where you get 20% of the time to do whatever you want, and interesting projects have come out of that because you were not pressured. You were allowed to do whatever you wanted to do. And, it talks also about fostering and incentivizing inspiration to say, hey, I have an idea, I don't have all the pieces yet. Can I take the time? And sometimes you can come back with something more solid and say, here it is. But because you have the room to do that.
Right. So that is a culture that is encouraging people to try that. There was a leader, I'm trying to remember, I just remember the story. He brought in, like he printed out get out of jail free cards like from Monopoly. He just printed a bunch out and gave them to all his employees. He was like, look, you have a get out of jail free card. Loosen up, you know, spread your wings, right? Like whatever you need to help create this, like make this place better, right?
Blame shame feels is so toxic, and it's hard to get rid of it. You know, once it's set, it's hard to get rid of it. And no matter how, you know, how many things people say, to me, one blame shame and guilt is so toxic compared to all people who those that people give me. I don't listen to those. It's that negative possess.
That is the human brain, right? Like people can, like 10 people can give me compliments. One person tells me I'm fat. I'm like, I'm fat.
Yeah.
You know, like I am fat, but you know, like that's the thing that my brain is going to go to, even though I'm like, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm all these other things, right? But I'll just focus on that, you know, that thing. And that's our brain, but we can rewire our brain, right? Like what are we surrounding ourselves with, right? Like I have little silly things like this, just my office is covered with them. You know, like that total white girl thing of like, you know, fly, soar like you mean it, you know, like all these different like inspiring things, because I need that. Like I need that kind of motivation. You need different motivation, right? Like, I don't know what.
I did a list.
A list, right? You're like, you feel good with a checklist.
It means having mentors and people that I love to constantly, you know, supporting me. And it's not, you know, it sounds cheesy, but for me, it's to have that lens, you know, as a person of color, having that lens really helps. Because sometimes I can just be baffled, not to think that way.
Right. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, like the only experience I know is my own, but like taking the time to talk to you and like what do you need and how can I support you, right? Like taking it out of myself for a minute and be like, what does being a good friend mean to you, or being a good coworker mean to you? Like what support do you need that's different than what Victor may need or what Tom may need, right? Like what do you need? And that's what's so amazing is like everybody's so different, and that's what makes it so tricky, right? Because all of us on a team, we might be like, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing great. And then, you know, I'm shut down with something one day, and, you know, you're just like, we need to get this done. And you're like, oh no, what is everybody doing? And you're like, where's my list? And, you know, like, so, but how do we come back together?
And there's power in that question, how can I support you? If you externalize that,
Right.
and your manager says that to you, you know, your superior, how can I support you? Even though it might be implied into the dynamic, if you don't say that, then it's a missed opportunity.
Yes.
So I find that interesting.
I think that's a great question as a leader to ask, like, how do you like to be managed, right? Like, I'm more laissez-faire, like, I trust you to do it. But some people need more direction, right? I had an assistant that was like, she really needs some direction. And so I really had to take the time to give her the direction that she needed, which was, you know, I'm a go-getter, so I'm just assuming everybody's a go-getter. And then I start working with other people and I'm like, oh, yeah, people are different,
Yeah.
right? Some people need direction. And some people have been shamed or blamed or made to feel guilty for being a go-getter, right? So maybe they had that piece of themselves, but for some reason, they don't allow that to be shown because of some trauma in their past. So, you know, it's no one right way, like we've talked about, but knowing better, doing better, learning, just being open to learning, like what can I do better?
Well, it makes me think of Daniel Pink
Yes.
and the whole topic about motivation, right? That
Yep.
not because you get paid more means that you will be more productive.
Right.
But if you foster elements within that environment that make you want to be better, and so it's not about the money, then you find that true purpose to get and become better. And then, of course, compensation will become there, but it's not the main objective.
Right. Compensation has been found not to be the driver, right? Like exactly what you're saying. Like, you can pay up to 10% less in some cases if the culture is a kind of culture that's nurturing and gives you all these other things, these intangibles. Like I can work here, I can work from home, I can take time off to go do something with my kids, I can, take care of my mom, whatever thing I have to do. I'm a food critic on my spare time and I'm gonna fly here, like whatever random thing, right? I lost my train of thought. So people, especially the newer generation coming up, they want to work for a purpose. They want their work that they're doing to have purpose and have meaning. And so not everybody can have that, like in different roles, but like Dr. Martin Luther King said, if you're a janitor, be the best janitor, right? Like just rock that janitorness, right? Like just have pride in what you're doing. But how do we create spaces where it's like the janitor is not less important than the CEO, right? Especially in the pay. Like I think some of those disparities, I don't understand. Because I think it all comes down into respecting the humanity that's inherent in all of us, and that we each need to show up, to do our work, to contribute, to go home and to love our families and to be able to, do things that are not work. So I feel like I'm on a soapbox.
No, but it's true. I think that's where the idea of value becomes so important, because if you feel valued, whether you're the CEO or the janitor, then you know that you can take ownership for your job and you will be valued.
Yeah, I mean, there's organizations that have been doing this. Southwest Airlines is a good example of the man who founded Southwest Airlines. Like he knew everybody's name, and he was just that kind of a person that everybody mattered, right? I'm trying to remember his name. Dan Price was the CEO that made everybody have a living wage of $75,000, and he gave up his own wages to do that. He's since not working at that organization anymore, but like that organization took off, right? Because people felt valued. They felt like he's giving up something of his own. So they wanted to work for him. They wanted to deliver for him, right? And he wasn't doing it because, like he thought, oh, this is what they're going to do. He was just like, I think people should be paid a living wage, And I think that might be motivational. Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia is another leader I admire. They just actually gave up all of their rights to their organization and profits because they wanted to be put towards the earth and protecting the earth.
Yeah.
They put all their money where their mouth is, and that is staggering to me. Oh, that's just not me. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, I think we can go hours and hours.
I know. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course.
I appreciate all of you. Oh my gosh.
What is interesting to me is that as we talk about safety in the workplace, psychological safety, it's like a cascading effect, right? That this comes or should be coming all the way from the top. And sometimes that's the challenge itself, that it's not originating from there. And so how do we foster that or provide that within our own environment to know that perhaps you're not getting external support, but you should do things to support yourself so you can navigate life and work, so you're not miserable at the end of the day.
All right, what support can you get if you don't have full psychological safety in your workplace? How can you cultivate that with some close confidants, right? Some, like, I'm navigating this, can we talk about it, and, or even outside of the workplace, right? Like, can we talk about this thing that I'm going through at work and I just kind of need to vent about it, right? Because it is, the truth, a number of the organizations I work with, there's just a disconnect. And it's not like purposefully, like people here, like they think they're doing good, and people down here are like, what the hell are they doing? And they're like, what the hell are they doing? And it's just like, but if we could create this like really integrated culture of what are we doing and how are we supporting each other and why is this person making this decision? And if they could just be more transparent about like, even just saying we had to make this decision because of X, right? Then people wouldn't make up all the stories, right? Like, oh, well, they're doing this because they hate me, or they're doing this because whatever, right? So that's where transparency helps.
Yeah.
It doesn't always, fix it, but
One
is it
step at a
helpful?
time. Okay. Thank you.
You can keep your little cards and remember me.
Oh.
You're always so silly.
I like it. It has.
You can put it at your desk if you want.
Okay.
Is it meaningful or is it not?
I mean, the message is meaningful.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's a good message. I'm gonna keep that good message.
So, Amy, are you doing other talks during this week here? Or?
I only submitted this one because I just kind of wanted to test the waters and FoCo.
Definitely. I feel like this has multiple approaches, especially for our organization as well.
Yes.
Talking about this and how the impact of this, because sometimes that's the group, right? That's the thing that you need, and you talk about like finding those disconnects, just like language. Sometimes the right word or the wrong word can provide a different perception of what you're trying to say. You didn't mean that, but that word delivers something.
Well, and how can we just have that conversation, right?
Well, and that's the thing right there, right? It has to start with a conversation, because if it's just a communication or an email that is one way, you're not getting the interaction.
Well, and what about the emails that it's like, something happened between this person and that person, and all of a sudden this whole email comes down that we don't do X, Y, Z because of this situation, rather than just talking about that situation to those people.
Right.
Now we're getting the whole organization, and now we're doing punitive change across the board. We don't allow this. So if that shuts down,
It does.
like, there's this thing called quiet quitting that everybody's talking about,
Yep.
right? And I feel like these are the things that create that, right? Like just these across the board, not helpful things
Yeah.
that just get rolled down, to make one person feel like, oh, did the thing, check the box. So, yeah, I'm definitely excited to roll things out and to shake things up a little bit.
Glad to hear that. John and I were talking earlier about 99% of projects tend to be communication. 1% is technical aspects.
Yes. Hi. Are you here are you speaking next? No.
No, you are.
Sorry.
I have to get out, but It was great. Thank you so much. Tom, great to meet you.
You too.
Thank you for supporting me.
Of
I
course.
appreciate you, Victor.
See you down.
Take care.
Take care.